way to start your day.
African story. Goes outside, then buy it back expensively. But what carries the day, rather the country, is the fact that they've had the same president for 47 years.
Wow.
Talk about democracy. But let's go to the proverb. The moon does not fight the darkness. It simply shines. How would you interpret it?
The moon does not hide the darkness.
Fight the darkness.
Fight the darkness. It simply
Shines.
shines. Wow. Well, I think it's about facts or truth. Let me put it this way: will always be there. You know, it may not always, you know, wipe out or block or remove the falsehoods, but the truth will always be there. And you know, well, this is what I think.
Yeah.
The truth will always be there, no matter what.
No matter what
happens.
happens.
what
Yeah.
you do, yeah.
Yeah. Well said.
Indeed, well said. And the conversation that we're having tomorrow, it probably would. It is today, but the conversation that we'll probably be having tomorrow as well.
Yeah.
There you go. Is that the numbers are looking quite painful at the moment.
Yeah.
We can talk about things, we can, aspire, you say what we feel, but that's where the phrase comes from, that the numbers will never lie to you. And some of these fundamental numbers that we're looking at today is that things have dropped significantly, whether you're looking at agriculture, manufacturing, transport, accommodation and food services, ICT, financial services. Interestingly enough, the things that policy in government has been spending all of its time on in the last few years. But those things have dropped in terms of their productivity and service. But the debt continues to rise. Right now, there are conversations with the World Bank and IMF, give us more money. Well, the World Bank is tightening the screws and they're saying, well, hang on a minute. How about you deal with corruption? How about you deal with some of these things and maybe we can have a conversation then about, if we're going to give you some more money. But then we have to ask the question, Billow, here we are with these now indictment on the economy about how it's not doing so well, but the debt question comes into play. Are we balancing the two really, or is it really a downhill situation now?
Well, I think we are not balancing the two. Let me put it this way. The debt is a financial obligation. Government needs money to run. To run means not necessarily addressing all issues that are necessary for growth of the economy. But to run means getting the government exist the way it has been. Pay the salaries, pay your bills, and do all those things that need to be done, as a government, as an institution. But the economy, for it to grow, there are a lot of other factors. It's not just about the government money. It's not about simply having some budget. I think it's more important about the policies that the government pursues. Some of those policies significantly are about creating a conducive environment for the economy to grow. That means the businesses and the people and the institutions and the all aspects of the of society. It requires certain environment for them to be able to do the activity so they can grow the economy. If those policies that govern the government do not encourage or provide that conducive environment, then you'll find the growth in the economy will be affected. That's one. Two, the growth in the economy can also be affected by external relations. External shocks could be, can play a factor. But I think those are the two main determinants. But so necessarily, the money that I borrow necessarily will not, if the government is borrowing, it doesn't correlate directly to an increase in the growth of the economy. No, that correlation is not necessarily there. Yep.
Okay. The 12.4 trillion shilling debt that Kenya has at the moment is a combination of external and internal debts. The debt portfolio for internal debt is probably what is more worrying to the economy because local banks should actually be in a position to provide credit that would essentially run the economy through SMEs. That's what should be the preserve. That's how it has happened for a lot of countries around the world. But government is the biggest borrower from local banks right now. And local banks can give that because there's a guarantee that it's government, it's perpetual, quote unquote, and it's not going anywhere. So you lock out people who would then be agents of growth for the economy and give it to government who not their job to run business, but to create an environment where it's conducive for business to run and flow. Mm-hmm. But we keep incurring this debt. So can you actually have a moving economy where you have a debt portfolio that has locked out credit that should go towards building the economy in the first place?
Yeah, that question is a valid question, but there are two aspects I need to talk about. One, it's true that when the government borrows domestically significantly, it will crowd out the private sector. That's a fact. But there is a policy. I remember when Kibaki came to power, there is a policy that we came up with, which encouraged that the Treasury should, as much as possible, through Treasury bonds in particular, longer-term Treasury bonds and so forth, borrow locally. It has two advantages. One, you will also limit the exposure in terms of the foreign exchange, in terms of the volatility in the exchange rate. So there'll be, you'll be avoiding that. And two, if you're borrowing locally, then you're also giving capacity to the institutions that are locally to be able to, encourage your capital, expand your capital markets, particularly in the bond market and so forth. But the one thing that I know, which has been a challenge, even when we are not borrowing domestically, our banks have been a bit shy for a very long time in lending to particularly the informal sector. And this is a country where 80% of the economy is subsistence, is informal. And for you, if you're in agriculture, for example, or if you're in the formal sector, small and medium-sized enterprise, for you to access credit has always been a big challenge. And in fact, I have personally been insisting for a long time that this is one of the failures of the central bank as a regulator, that they've always focused on regulatory aspects, but they have not been focusing on facilitating the access of credit to the economy. There are countries where for you to run a bank, for you to be licensed, a certain percentage of your money, your loans must go to agriculture, a certain percentage of your loan must go to SMEs. That's the way to, deliberately encourage lending to those institutions. That way, then you will ring-fence money, whether the government wants to borrow or not for treasury, but you will have money always for the private sector, for those areas that the government deems necessary. But without that, when central bank simply wants these guys to show a very good balance sheet, or P&L account every year or balance sheet, then they're allowed to simply, lend to government, and there you get, crazy profits. That's why even in the worst of our economic situations, any year when we have performed the worst, the financial institutions have always made huge profits. There's no correlation, because they've always said, I want to put my money where? In the government, because there's the premium. That's what they do.
Billow, we look at debt, and the government has to borrow for it to function, and we know the parameters upon which the government can borrow. However, we have instances where there is conversations on odious debt that exists in the country, and even that is a matter that is before court today. And one Okiom Tata says that Kenya has overpaid its debt by about 3 trillion shillings. Now, as we talk about odious debt in the country, what are the realities or facts around existence of odious debt, reading together with the Eurobond that did not even follow the process into going to the consolidated account? It was received in an offshore account. What is the reality around odious debt in the country? And if it does exist, then what is the responsibility for the government? Should Kenyans pay for it? Or should we go back again into refinancing terms that have been used in terms to address that? Should we renegotiate on the same?
This case by Omtata is a very interesting, and I think it's going to be a precedent, not only in Kenya, but I think for many countries in Africa that have a similar challenge. Because there are two aspects of that which are very important when you talk about the odious debts and the case in the court. One is, were these loans properly approved as required by the Constitution? That means, did Parliament approve it? Were the loans obtained legally? I think that's the question. The second is, were the loans used in the manner required by the Constitution? Were they used to benefit the public?
Public, yes.
I think those two are fundamental issues that if the court ever makes a ruling on it, would have significant impact on going forward on the way the government will borrow. I have seen the government's case arguments that, look, there's an audit going on and the courts should wait for the audit. But let me tell you, we've been asking for this audit for many years.
Yes.
The government has always avoided this audit, or it has always been promised that there's an audit. But I think the issue is not about an audit to know how much our loan is. I think the issue is those two questions. And so it's a very valid argument I think Kenyans have. Now, the question number one, the one on how is this legally approved? I think this is one of the things that, let me tell you, we tried to deal with when we were at Bomas in 2010. Because we tried to argue that, look, the only way to deal with that question is to put the requirement for parliamentary approval before the loan is taken. So that Treasury must seek approval for the facility prior to signing on the. But now I think, with the influence of government and so on, eventually the Constitution was done, the final that we have now, that was thrown out. And I think what happens now is that Treasury is simply required to submit a report every year on the loans it has borrowed and the terms of those loans and so forth and so forth and so forth. So it's after the fact simply informing Parliament, and that, I think that is where where the weakness is really in our situation. But there's no doubt that their questions have been raised and loudly and in public on some of the loans that have been taken. And a good example is the one you mentioned, the Euro bonds, a few years ago. Because the Constitution, let me tell you, there's two aspects of the Constitution that has been always ignored of the Public Finance Management Act. One, the fiscal procedures, the fiscal rules that are required. Loans must be borrowed to finance development. This is very clear in law.
Yes.
Two, development must not be less than 30% of our budget. Both rules are often ignored by Parliament. By Treasury, consistently. And there's been no, pushback by Parliament, really. And I think that is where the issue is. So that even last year, if you look at what IAS published the other day, even last year, 2024-25, only 70% of the money that has been borrowed has been used for development. So that means about 30% of it was actually used for consumption. And this is where the issue is. That's why in the Eurobond then, government had a very difficult time trying to explain what happened to that $2 billion.
Yes.
Where? Just show us. Used it fine, but where did you use it? Which road and where? Which program or which project? The fact remains that most of these loans are used to finance the budget. And once you're told it's budget support, then it simply means it can be used for recurrent expenditure also. And that's where the challenge is. The lender has no obligation to you and me, or to our representatives in Parliament. The lender simply has an obligation to whoever signs the dotted lines. This is the Treasury. That's one of the challenges. This is why IMF is now seeking immunity to get out of that case, and quite likely they will.
But the manner in which we say this is that we know that there are irregularities, not just irregularities, but illegalities in how this money is used. And when it's been expended, it's very easy to go back to the folks and say, well, you know what, can you extend us, essentially another line of credit for us to then be able to do this, that, or the other thing, where it is very clear that in the recent past, you haven't used the money for what it's supposed to be. Now, we could have a whole conversation about how and why certain institutions should be involved in the governance of a nation. We can talk about they should actually be put on notice to refuse some of these bids when they come back, where somebody goes and sits in DC and says, can we have some more money? But the truth of the matter, and I think it's in the public, Parliament sits at a place where it's supposed to say, sorry, you're not allowed to borrow except for this purpose. Now, have you borrowed in the past? Yes. You should be able to show us how you used the money, and if it didn't go towards development, where did it go, and who's responsible for that debacle? That never, not really, it never happens. And so we have debt upon debt upon debt. Many have argued that for the fact that it was taken to do something outside of development, and that in some cases never did reach the consolidated account, because folks have gone and they've done the through the alley to the end of the rabbit hole work and said that because money does leave a trail, there is no trail to show that some of this money ever ended up in Kenya. Now, based on those things, is this debt odious or not?
Well, I think there's no doubt once this case is properly, executed by the court, and based on the evidence that they will be providing, there's no doubt that there are loans, there are facilities that will fall into that category I've mentioned. That there'll be no evidence probably to show that those loans actually ended up in the consolidated fund, or that they have been used in the manner in which they were required to be used, and so that is going to happen. That I know for a fact that for example, although the law, both the PFM and the Constitution do provide some, if you look at the language of the law, that there are expenses, and obligations, financial obligations attendant to borrowing or securing, facility or guarantees or any of the securities that are issued. All financial obligations attendant to that. That's what the Constitution says. And someone could argue on that and say, look, yes, we paid some fellows in New York. I borrowed $2 billion, but I paid $500 million for some consultants. They would argue that based on that. So it's going to be that's what I'm saying, in that case, it's important that it comes before the court, so that then it comes out clearly. A precedent is set by the court on what constitutes a legal expenditure relating to loans, and whether we can actually spend that money out there before it comes into the consolidated fund. Because the reason why it has to come into the consolidated fund is so that it can be approved by Parliament. On the votes will be there, the appropriations will be there. But anything that happens outside the consolidated fund, then it becomes very difficult for Parliament to approve. And so
But we fall short of just saying it's illegal.
It is illegal. It
is illegal.
That's basically what the language will be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Billow, I want to look at today. If I want to go get a facility from a bank, say it's to put up a house, right? There will be a discussion on how that is to happen. Phase 1, we're here, we'll give you this amount. Phase 2, phase 3, until you conclude. And one would assume that that is the same structure that the government would apply, in the sense that we want to borrow to build up, say, the expressway, and this is how much we need. And after being given that amount, then that fund, according to the PFM Act, would go specifically towards that project, right?
Yeah.
But when now we find that we took the loan, we have spent the money, but there is no expressway, how does that qualify to be legal expenditure where the money was spent for the purpose it was not meant for? Would that then automatically fall into an odious debt?
Unless, of course, Treasury subsequently went to Parliament, which the Constitution somehow provides for it, and, argue that there are exceptional circumstances that have arisen for that facility or that
to be redirected,
to be, diverted to some other activity. They could say there was an emergency, there are, droughts, and the government had this crisis and that crisis, and that, if subject to approval. The thing with what makes all this legality thing very important is that you do not go through the due process, which requires you to get approval from Parliament. I think that is critical. But let me also say one thing, which from my experience, this thing about getting Parliament to approve is really quite technical, because the way Treasury submits its budget or debt papers to Parliament is so complicated and so technical that quite often I think members of parliament would not even understand what is being submitted.
So is that by design? Is it
It is by
intentionally
design.
complicated so that you get fatigued
Yeah.
even looking at the first
It's-
set of tables, for example, and you say, you know what, at the end of the day, what's the sum? Can
Yeah.
we afford it? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Because there's no document. This is a facility from XYZ bank. This is
Yeah.
what it's financing or no. Something like that would not come to you. This thing would be submitted in estimates, in financial estimates, quite often as an appendix. And you'll only see servicing of loans. And unless some... And I remember this when we had that Anglo leasing case in 2005. 18 different loans for 18 different projects. And everything was out there in the appendices down there, where they put the loans. In the estimates, it's all about how to spend money for buying papers and this and that, but you'll not see anything about the loans. You'll see about roads to be constructed, or you'll see about this or that, but you'll not see that this will be financed by this. But you'll find somewhere at the back there's movements on loans, very technical and complicated thing, which unless those people in parliament, now they have a parliamentary budget office, which should be able to give them that analysis. But that is the way they get these things done. And so, but there's no doubt, to answer your question, that there has to be an approval if there's a diversion. If there isn't, then it's an illegality.
Yeah.
And the law provides, PFMX provides specific penalties for accounting officers who are in breach of that law. Yes. Clearly, you don't. Let me tell you that if you look at PFM, there are almost 30, 40 different penalties provided for people not complying with people in breach of the financial provisions. But rarely are they ever.
When are they ever applied?
Rarely,
Because we're talking about the technicality of some of these things.
If you spend money above your budget, even as an accounting officer or ministry, provisions are there very clearly in the PFM Act for you to be dealt with. But tell me which treasury, the accounting officer is treasury would take action on those guys. There's always that thing we call political expediency, that there's politics, there are parties, and this is, at the end of the day, everything is about politics.
I mean, Billow, if all these reports that you say come to Parliament, they come in technicalities, so difficult for people to comprehend. But then we have the committees that one would say have been clearly put in place and perhaps have individuals who understand what they're doing. So I would go to several committees, so Finance Committee, Budget, Peak and Park. These are committees that one would say would pick up on these issues and be able to advise Parliament or advise government on what exactly is happening. So are we saying that even in the committees that we do have in place, perhaps are not cut out to understand these technicalities? And is that by design as well?
No. You're leaving out the elephant in the room. It's called politics. That committee is made of parties. So there'll be lobbying. Those who represent the ruling party today will want those things that the government, the executive, wants to be passed. It happens in every parliament, whether you're in Nairobi or in Washington. So that's where the argument will be. Everyone can see this law is not necessary. It's not proper, but they have to get it passed because that's what the government of the day wants. So in committees, you'll find reports always have those political experience will be all factored in the report. That's why you find some people approving it, some people rejecting it. So the reports are always based on that, and that's why government is there to lobby always to get whatever they want approved.
Okay.
And so that is that's the key factor. Yes. Otherwise, it's sometimes not about knowledge. It's about the fact that politics, government, and I'll give you an example. When we were having this SGR, it was debated extensively. There were people who didn't want it. But government used their members, in the committees and in parliament to ensure. Remember the laptop, you remember the Galanacle, every major project that the government wants done, they will lobby their team. In the same way that if you were to be appointed as a CS, they will lobby to get you approved, whether you qualify or not. Somehow you've seen the way that it's done. So there's the political aspect of it. That always plays out in committees and in the House.
Are the loans that Kenya, let's say, have taken over the last couple of years and what is being negotiated at the moment necessary?
Well, I think, if you ask me, they are not all necessary. They are not all necessary because when you look at our priorities, sometimes they are misplaced. You might think, we might argue that, yes, we need an SGR to be extended from here, from Naivasha to Malaba. We'll require to borrow hundreds of billions. But the question is it a priority today? That's a question which can be discussed. And some of us will say, no. Is it a good project? It's a good project. It might be viable in the long term and so, but is it really a priority? When you have got already 11 trillion loan, is it something that you really want to take?
Yeah.
No. But if you have got an alternative way of financing, which is not a loan,
like a PPP, for example.
like a PPP or something else, then go for it, but not a loan. I think this is why in the last few months I've been quite, supportive of some of the innovative ideas they've been coming up with to try and get around borrowing so that they don't go directly for loans. If the PPPs examples, and some of trying to sell some of the assets and see whether they can finance some of the activities. So I think, so you can say yes. The issue is the priorities, and there are so many, by the way. You can't, when you go through the estimates, you go through the activities of the project of the governments, you'll find that some of these things are not really necessary. But so we are just in this is the way we do things. That culture, the work culture. So every ministry must run, every institution must run, and they all want money, and they'll submit their requests. Political expediencies, they'll be provided. You can't shut down this ministry or shut down this organization or shut down that one because of politics. But if someone really wanted to make a difference, I say, forget about the politics. I'm not interested in whether you elect me or not, but I want to do this. They can take a pen and pencil and reduce our cost, and we may not need to borrow all those loans.
So Kenya's in the shackles of debt at the moment, as are a lot of nations. But for me, the law has provided a way out. The law, just like you said, there's a PMF Act, there's the Constitution that says that there's certain ways in which you can save yourself from doing this. Number one, borrow for development, and let us actually see that development. But as you've painted the picture for us, that there are many technicalities at the legislative body that then make it difficult for them to handle it, whether it's lack of understanding, not really sure how to read those estimates or even know what they're all about, because the loan itself is in the back end of all of this. One would assume that when you're putting a member of parliament in office, that you would put somebody then who would be able to question and interrogate these things, because essentially that's why they're there. Even if you're unable to do it yourself, you would have the wherewithal mentally to say, okay, I don't understand this, but how about we debate in parliament a few days longer before we say okay to this thing. If it means because you have access to researchers, it's one of the costs that Kenyans pay for. You have access to clerks, you have access to a budget office, like you said. Find out the information, make decisions based on information and not because of who you're politically aligned with. An election in this country was overturned. The results of the election was overturned based on a technicality, not on the results, not the numbers. That the passage of this thing had a question mark. So because of the passage, let us say we're going to pull those results and ask all of you to go back. If an entire election could be nullified because of that, here we are talking about the future of millions of Kenyans that is being held to ransom because of this debt. It's throttling industry. It's throttling social growth and progression that you cannot do. Let's be honest. Look at the numbers. You cannot do anything today because of that debt question. 100 shillings, 70 is going towards the payment of debt. And we are saying that all of these things, overheads, recurrent expenditure, and the future development must be handled by the remaining 30 shillings. It is impossible. It's not, maybe it can't work. It is impossible. It is not going to happen. But the answer is right there. It's like the person whose handcuffs has been removed but doesn't want to move. You know what to do, you don't do it, but then we can sit and complain. But rather than deal with the issue, we go to the World Bank and say, give us more. Give us some more money.
Yeah. Very, very valid. Very valid. Let me tell you, I have dealt with finance even when I was from the time I was in Parliament. I was the chair in Senate Finance. I was also the shadow finance minister. But let me tell you one thing. Whenever there is a debate in the House on matters finance, you have the lowest quorum in our Parliament. the lowest. If you get 2-3 people sitting there, you are lucky. Nobody has appetite for matters, numbers, and finance. This is one thing that you will always see. That tomorrow you can watch if there's proceedings are in the House. When there are other political issues, always juicy and everyone wants to be there. But numbers, budget issues, and those things, and nobody will be very keen. So this is why the agitation by Kenyans in the last 2-3 years on really these issues of budget and taxes and so forth is putting a lot of pressure on members of parliament to take a more keen interest. So that I think now when budgets come, it's not after what happened in 2024.
Yeah.
I think when budgets come now, people will be a bit cautious on what they are going to say yes or. But even then, the only number that they've been worried about is, are there increases in tax? Is the bread and milk of no? Then they are not worried. But that is not where the issue is. The issue is you have got 3 to 4 trillion shillings expenditure by a government, which is in those documents, bulky documents really. Which requires you to take a pen and pencil and really try and understand what's going on. What are those things and why are they being spent, and can we not remove it? And so those are the things which I agree requires more time to be debated and more time to be discussed, for example, in the committees and even in the House. But because of that lack of appetite for matters and numbers, let me tell you, there's some quite often. I remember in Senate when the budget papers, like the budget policy papers and all those things come, we're sometimes given only 1 day. 1 day, and those are very because of the process. The Parliament, the Treasury will take advantage of the process laid out in the Act, which requires that latest by this date you submit the document. So they are submitted, and so it goes on a conveyor belt, and your time you are given is sometimes you had a day just to go through and submit our comments, but by the time you are submitting our Senate, the National Assembly is about to conclude, and Treasury. So these things are done sometimes I agree, deliberately. But I think the law is very clear. Everything to do with our budget today under the new constitution is the responsibility of Parliament. They have a wider responsibility. If you look at the old constitution, it was all Treasury. Now the responsibility really is Parliament. But like I told you, I think that's probably one of the single largest failures in Parliament is to deal with. Lastly, I want to point one thing out again. Sometimes, it's not like they don't know. Yeah. Sometimes people know, but everyone has an interest as a politician. Yeah, you want your road done, as long as it's been included for you here, you want that budget to go because there's a road going to be done in your village. Yeah. You have some project of yours which will be included. So everyone then looks at, it's how they do it, isn't it? Those things are, so that it's an enticement for you to go through this thing and pass. Most of the members of Parliament nowadays, they look at CDF. How much is it? Has it been increased? Yes. Others look at. So I think this thing about the interest by politicians when they're discussing these things of budget, it came out very clearly in 2023 when Trump in the first, I think it was in Biden's time, 2024 or 2023, when that issue of infrastructure bill they were trying to pass, and one senator was not happy with it and held on that thing for months. Eventually, I think when his concern was addressed, then he said, I'm going to vote. And that's how that bill went through. So for members of Parliament, sometimes that interest, the local interest, what is in it for him, overrides even the bigger picture of what of you looking at the...
that speaks directly to political goodwill from the top all the way down, right? Because then we talk about, and I will try to segment it, political goodwill in the sense that the president would want to push his agenda through members of Parliament because he's being smart and putting in a road to your area is included in this budget. So definitely you feel obliged because there are promises you gave to your people. But then again, there is also political goodwill in the sense that the people who sit in these houses, members of Parliament, do not see the need of taking that fine tooth to come through each and every single thing to give Mwananchi value for money. We would look at government of Kenya. If we decide to come up with good taxation regime that would enable investors to come in, to make business grow in the country, would be able, one would say, to get taxes that would be able to fund everything else that we are borrowing to do. But because we are so short-sighted, we do not want to think far, we choose to go for the low-hanging fruits because it is easy to deal with. But if we thought long term, we are able to address these issues through proper taxation, proper borrowing, and implementation of the law, and perhaps we do not need to find ourselves in odious debt.
We are overtaxed. Let me tell you. If you ask me, I would not discuss increasing taxes in this country. No one pays taxes the way we pay in the whole of Eastern Central Africa. I have, the argument that we pay more than all those countries combined is what we collect. I mean, it's clear. Our issue has always been on the expenditure. And the reason why expenditure is an issue is that about 30% or 1/3 is stolen. It's corruption. And this has been consistently confirmed by every one of the government that has come to power from the time of, Kibakis and they have always insisted that 1/3 of that money is disappearing.
Yes.
Whether it's through inflated bills, whether it's through whatever it is. But this is where the issues are. So if someone wanted really to raise money, you can raise it by simply addressing those issues.
Yes.
But the politics, because of the politics, and then those things cannot be addressed. And so we have to look for more money to try and so I think your question is that issue of taxes. I would really say it's not going to be a solution. We will introduce taxes, but if 1/3 of that tax will still disappear through misappropriation, mismanagement, misplaced priorities, and all those things. So what would be the benefit? We're just making the cost of living higher. And people continue to suffer. Look at countries around us. They're not richer than us. Go to Ethiopia. They don't tax any of the basic foods. They don't. It's tax. They waiver. Go to Egypt. Go to all these countries. They don't, because they know these are critical things for the ordinary people. They want the cost of living to be low. So they would not tax those basic commodities. If it is industry, you go to Egypt, they will tell you, okay, you are manufacturing. So power is provided to you at a very low rate, so that then you can compete. You can compete regionally with your products and so forth, and you export and so forth. So I think but otherwise, in a situation where ours is, that's why I told you from the beginning, the issue is really about policies. If we don't address that deliberately, we say this is where we want to go, this is what we want to do to address our problems of the people. But if you just want to collect money and you tell them to do that, tomorrow they tell you we want taxes for environment. We want taxes on these vehicles. It's a luxury. Vehicles are not luxury. So when you find 100% tax
increment
on the cost of a vehicle, vehicles are not necessary. They're essential to provide goods and services. So that cost will come into the cost of goods and services.
So having said that, is it possible for because we know the number crunchers, the policymakers within Treasury, essentially are the ones responsible for doing this. When you talk about tax policy, when you talk about tax environment, and you look at decisions about the cost of living, that comes from this set of people. Are these apolitical positions? Because if they were, it didn't matter the government of the day and what they wanted to achieve, whether it was people who wanted to have money in their own pockets. It shouldn't matter that these are the folks who would say, this is what we have set out with all of these conditions taken into consideration, and this is the direction we should go. But what we do find, whether it is in Parliament, whether it is the number crunchers in Treasury, is that somebody who is leaning in a political position, in a certain political position, it is going to affect the policy decisions they make. Is it possible to have policy completely separated from politics?
Not in a million years.
Not possible.
No. That's why elections are there, so that every government that comes to power has own policies. They tell you manifesto, political manifesto. Those are the things which end up as being government policies for the period you are in power. But there's no doubt that you can have a long term. In the past, what used to happen, I think I mentioned this last time I was here, they had Ministry of Economic Planning. So that the planning period is a wider horizon. It goes that 20, 30 years. So that then the policies that every government comes in would be in line with that long-term blueprint for development of the economy and so forth. But what has happened over the years is that everything seems to be short-term based on the manifesto for that particular party. I have promised Hustler Fund, I must provide X amount of billions for this. We promised this, we must go through that better arrangement, So that's where it is possible, but if only is that political goodwill to remain committed to a longer term economic policy for the purpose of the country, not about the politics of
the party.
of the party and survival and and those things. But that has been our single largest because and also our type of politics.
Yes.
I've always asked people, be very careful if you compare what's happening, say, in Ethiopia or any of these countries, compare with Kenya. No, look at 3 Ps. The people are different. The politics is different. The policies are different. You can only compare those things when you look at all those things. Because our political system, for example, is different. The government wants to do this, they're told, no. I can go to a court in Mandara and stop that road to that infrastructure, that railway to Malaba. I'm in Mandara, in a court in Mandara. I can do that. You can't do that in most of these countries. You can't, so the people are also different. The way people are paid. Look at some of these countries, you'll be surprised. They're completely, but there's no doubt that we need to change. I mean, I see a situation where we just dig in the hole, and we're getting in. And simply what governments do is just kick the can down the road for the next guys to worry about. And this is not going to be good for us, I think.
Unfortunately. The reasons why we have this conversation is to make some of these realities plain and clear. That it is obvious that Kenya is in a state of illegality when it comes to its debts.
Yes.
And we can try to paint it or call it something else, but it's an illegal state of
My
things.
advice to you is talk to members of parliament particularly, because they need to be the ones who need to say, yellow card, red card to the government, say, no, we can't do this.
We can't do this.
We can't do this.
And it must stop.
And that's where the weak link is really today in the institutions of it. The courts can only, delay projects by saying we've stopped, but really it's parliament where you can say, no.
Don't do this.
Let's get another alternative.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Political economist Billow Kerrow has been here with us, opening the lid on some of these things today. Thank you for joining us in this conversation today, as always. They continue. Good morning, 9 a.m.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Raise your arms